I never imagined grief would turn my own parents into strangers overnight. One week, I was holding my grandfather's cold hand in a hospital room. The next, I was holding a lawsuit with my name on it. They said it was about fairness. I knew it was about greed. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had trusted me with more than memories. He left me proof. Secrets. A truth buried so deep it could destroy the people who raised me. When the court date arrived, I walked in alone, shaking but prepared. Because once the judge looked at me, everything changed. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now. I used to believe family meant safety. That belief died quietly, without warning, the morning my mother called me 3 days after Grandpa's funeral. Her voice wasn't soft or grieving. It was sharp, impatient, already demanding something from me. Have you found the papers yet? She asked. I stood frozen in Grandpa's bedroom, surrounded by half-open boxes. His old books lined the shelves like loyal soldiers. The faint smell of his aftershave still clung to the air, comforting and painful at the same time. What papers? I asked. There was a pause. Not confusion. Calculation. The important ones, she said. The will. My chest tightened. Grief was still raw inside me, heavy like wet concrete pressing on my lungs. I'm still sorting his things, I said quietly. She sighed, irritated. Well, don't take too long. We need to know what he left. The call ended without a goodbye. That was the first crack. The day of the will reading came too fast. The lawyer's office felt cold, sterile and unforgiving. The air smelled like printer ink and old coffee. My parents sat across from me, stiff and polished. My mother kept adjusting her scarf. My father tapped his foot against the floor over and over. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading. I barely heard the opening lines. My heartbeat was too loud. My hands were damp with sweat. Then he said my name. Once. Then again. As the primary heir. Silence swallowed the room. I felt heat rush to my face. My parents' eyes burned into me. My mother's lips parted in shock. My father's jaw tightened, his expression turning dark. I stared at my lap, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The lawyer continued listing properties, savings, personal items. The words floated past me like smoke. None of it felt real. When it ended, my parents stood up without speaking. In the parking lot, my father finally turned to me. This isn't right, he said. My mother forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Your grandfather was confused. You know that. I shook my head. He knew exactly what he was doing. They didn't argue. They didn't comfort me. They just walked away. At home, the pressure began immediately. First, it sounded like concern. You must be overwhelmed, my mother said during dinner. That's a lot of responsibility for someone like you, my father added. Then it turned into guilt. Family should share, my mother whispered one night. Your grandfather would want peace, my father said calmly. When I didn't agree, their patience vanished. You manipulated him, my mother accused, her voice cold and sharp. My breath caught. That's not true. My father slammed his fist on the table. Plates rattled. You will do the right thing, he growled. My hand shook, but I didn't back down. No, I said. The word felt heavy, final. Days later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. I recognized the legal seal immediately. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Court notice. Formal language. My name typed neatly at the top. My parents were suing me. The room spun. I collapsed onto the couch, the paper crumpling in my grip. My chest burned like it was being torn open. I cried until my throat ached and my eyes swelled shut. Memories flooded my mind. Birthday cakes. School plays. Family holidays. When did love turn into legal threats? That night, sleep refused to come. The house felt too quiet. Too empty. I wandered back into Grandpa's room, drawn by something I couldn't explain. I opened drawers slowly, carefully, as if he might scold me for being careless. At the bottom of an old filing cabinet, I saw an envelope. My name was written on it. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. Grandpa's. My heart skipped. My breath caught in my throat. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it for a long moment. My hands trembled as I turned it over. No return address. No date. Just my name. He had left this for me. Only me. I slid my finger under the seal. I held the envelope against my chest, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The paper felt thin, fragile, like it could tear if I breathed wrong. I wasn't ready yet. Not emotionally. Not mentally. I walked to the window and looked outside. Grandpa's garden was still there. Untouched. The bench where he used to sit every morning faced the sunrise. I remember bringing him tea. How he would smile at me like I was the only person in the world. That man would never betray me. I sat back down on the bed and closed my eyes. My parents' voices echoed in my head. Their accusations. Their anger. Their sudden hunger for something they claimed was theirs. Had they always been like this? I thought about childhood dinners where Grandpa defended me when my father raised his voice. About the way Grandpa would squeeze my hand when my mother criticized me too harshly. I had thought it was love. Now it felt like protection. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from my mother. Don't forget who raised you. I didn't reply. Another message followed. We can still fix this if you do the right thing. My hands shook with rage. With hurt. With disbelief. They weren't asking how I was coping. They weren't checking if I was eating or sleeping. They only cared about what Grandpa left behind. I looked back at the envelope. Maybe Grandpa had seen this coming long before I did. I broke the seal fully and pulled out the folded pages inside. My name appeared again, written in his careful hand. The first line made my stomach drop. If you are reading this, then they have already turned on you. Tears blurred my vision. He knew. Every word felt like a hand reaching out from the past, steady and certain. He wrote about fear. About regret. About why he trusted me more than anyone else. My chest tightened with every sentence. By the time I reached the end, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I understood then that this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about truth. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. My heart was racing, but my fear was changing shape. It was becoming something sharper. Stronger. Outside, the house creaked softly, settling into the night. Everything felt different now, heavier and clearer at the same time. I realized this letter wasn't just a warning. It was a test. Grandpa was asking me to choose whether I would stay silent or stand alone. And as I stared at the envelope in my hands, I knew my parents had no idea what they had just awakened. The moment I made that choice, my family, my past, and my future were about to collide in ways I could no longer escape forever. I read Grandpa's letter again, then again, my hands shaking as if the paper carried weight. Every sentence felt alive, watching me. He wrote calmly, carefully, like he feared panic would betray him. He spoke of fear, regret, and choices he never explained aloud before death finally reached him alone. He said he'd changed the will in silence because truth was dangerous. He knew my parents would challenge it, twist stories, cry loudly. He warned me they would lie without shame. Reading it felt like hearing his voice whisper instructions from the other side, while protecting me carefully always inside. The letter mentioned documents hidden elsewhere, far from this house. He said he never trusted walls that listened. My chest tightened between grief and purpose. For the first time since his death, mourning shifted into preparation. Like grief sharpening itself into resolve I couldn't ignore anymore after reading his warning. I folded the letter and stared at the ceiling, breathing slowly. My parents' faces floated through my thoughts, smiling too tightly. I wondered how long Grandpa had carried this alone. How many nights he stayed awake, protecting me silently while fearing his own children and planning everything ahead of time. I confronted my parents the next evening, letter in hand. My voice shook as I read lines aloud. My mother laughed immediately, sharp and forced. She called it fake. My father's eyes hardened. He warned me not to dig my own grave if I valued peace, safety, family, and survival. Their reaction confirmed everything Grandpa feared. There was no confusion, no sadness, only threat. My mother accused me of manipulation again. My father leaned closer, lowering his voice, promising consequences. Fear crawled up my spine, but certainty settled deeper inside me where doubt once lived quietly before everything broke open. I left their house shaking, anger mixing with disbelief. Outside, the night air felt cold and sharp. I realized Grandpa hadn't exaggerated danger. He had understated it. They weren't fighting for fairness. They were fighting to silence something buried long ago that threatened everything they carefully built, hid, and protected. I hired a lawyer the next week using savings meant for emergencies. Sitting in his small office, I felt exposed. He listened carefully, asking quiet questions. When I showed him the letter, his expression changed. He warned me this fight would be brutal emotionally, legally, financially, publicly, painfully, and relentlessly. My parents hired the best lawyer in town. His name appeared everywhere, polished and confident. Court filings arrived thick and cruel. They painted me unstable, greedy, ungrateful. Each sentence felt like a slap. I barely recognized myself in their version of me that twisted truth into weapons meant to destroy. I stopped sleeping. Every sound startled me. I reread Grandpa's letter nightly, memorizing instructions. He mentioned a place distant and forgotten. Somewhere he hid proof he never trusted near family. The idea terrified me, but curiosity pushed harder than fear ever could manage, resist, silence, suppress, control, deny fully anymore. Late one night, I followed his directions carefully. I drove alone, heart racing, headlights cutting through darkness. The road narrowed, memories growing louder. Grandpa's words echoed with every mile. I felt watched by the past and guided by it simultaneously as fear and purpose collided inside my chest, breath shallow. The place looked abandoned, swallowed by dust and silence. I hesitated before entering, listening. The door creaked loudly, echoing accusation. Inside smelled of old wood and secrets. I remembered Grandpa bringing me here once, telling me to remember this location because one day it would matter deeply, urgently, painfully, forever. I searched carefully, hands trembling, every noise amplified. Dust coated my clothes. My heart pounded with each step. Then I saw it. A small locked box hidden beneath boards. The sight alone made my knees weak and my breath catch sharply as fear mixed with hope, dread, certainty, and truth. I knelt and touched the box gently, afraid it might vanish. The metal felt cold. This was it. Whatever Grandpa protected lived here. My phone buzzed suddenly, making me flinch hard. For a moment I thought my parents had found me already and fear flooded my veins, choking breath, thoughts. It was only a notification, meaningless, but my nerves stayed tight. I focused again, prying the box open slowly. Inside were folders carefully wrapped. Dates. Names. Numbers. My hands shook harder. This wasn't sentimental. This was evidence, raw and undeniable, capable of destroying lies, families, reputations, illusions, futures, histories forever. I flipped through pages quickly, terrified someone would appear. Bank statements. Signatures. Transactions that didn't make sense. Patterns formed instantly. Grandpa had tracked everything. Years of theft. Years of silence. My parents' faces filled my mind, rearranged completely as truth replaced memories, innocence, trust, loyalty, safety, love, warmth, certainty forever. My stomach turned as realization settled. They hadn't just betrayed me now. They'd betrayed him for years. He stayed quiet to protect me. Rage burned through grief, sharpening my resolve. I wasn't just defending an inheritance anymore. I was defending his truth against lies, fear, power, manipulation, cruelty, greed, darkness. I copied everything carefully, photographing pages with shaking hands. I hid originals back inside, covering tracks. The weight of responsibility pressed heavy. If I failed, everything Grandpa endured would vanish. I whispered a promise aloud, my voice echoing in the empty space around me, sealing commitment, courage, purpose, defiance, resolve. Driving back, fear followed me closely. Every car felt suspicious. Every shadow looked alive. Yet beneath fear, something new pulsed. Strength. Grandpa had armed me with truth. My parents didn't know it yet, but their control was already slipping fast through fingers, cracks, exposure, light, consequence, justice, time, inevitability approaching. When I returned home, I locked every door. I slept with lights on, phone charged. The world felt hostile now, but clarity replaced confusion. I finally understood Grandpa's silence. He waited until I was strong enough to stand where he couldn't anymore, without fear, compromise, hesitation, surrender, retreat, collapse, weakness. I called my lawyer the next morning, voice steady for the first time. I told him everything. There was a pause, then seriousness. He said this changed the case completely. Still, he warned me. Using this would trigger retaliation I wasn't fully prepared for from powerful, desperate, ruthless, familiar enemies. That night, I returned the copies to a safe place, triple-checking locks. I stared at the ceiling again, but differently. Fear no longer paralyzed me. Focused me. Whatever came next, I would face it with Grandpa's truth in my hands, and courage, conviction, clarity, purpose, strength, justice, resolve. Hidden beneath dust and silence was proof powerful enough to save me or destroy them. I knew once I used it, nothing could be undone. The next move would decide everything. As I closed my eyes, I understood the war had truly begun with truth, justice, consequences, survival, and fate. I lifted the storage box with both arms, surprised by its weight, dust coating my sleeves as if it resisted being opened. It smelled like metal and old paper, like secrets sealed too long. My heart pounded as I set it down, afraid of what truth might finally breathe. I had come this far following Grandpa's warnings, and there was no turning back now. I unclipped the rusted latch, feeling my childhood crack open with the sound. Inside waited answers I was never meant to see, and fear pressed hard against my ribs. Still I looked, without blinking once. Alone. The first folder held bank statements, neatly arranged, dates circled in red ink I recognized as Grandpa's careful hand. Amounts withdrawn monthly, always small enough to hide, always signed by someone else. My stomach turned as patterns emerged, years of quiet theft laid bare. I flipped pages faster, breath shallow, realizing this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, practiced, and devastatingly familiar. Another folder showed forged signatures, my parents' names tracing Grandpa's. I felt sick, complicit without knowing. Every birthday gift suddenly tasted bitter. The room seemed to shrink. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying not to scream. Receipts fell out next, vacations, furniture, renovations I remembered too clearly. Trips they said they saved for, gifts blamed on bonuses. It was all paid with Grandpa's money, siphoned slowly while he trusted them. Shame burned my face as memories rewrote themselves. My laughter and photos felt stolen now. I copied documents frantically, hands shaking, afraid the truth could vanish. I scanned everything, emailing backups, whispering apologies to Grandpa. Tears blurred the numbers but not the facts. They had betrayed him. And me completely. I sat there shaking, listening to my pulse, wondering how deep it went. It went everywhere. In court, the air felt colder, sharper, as if truth itself waited to be challenged. My parents sat together, hands clasped, playing grief like theater. Their lawyer spoke smoothly, painting me as unstable, greedy, confused. Each word cut, but I stayed still. When my mother cried on the stand, the judge leaned in. She said Grandpa was forgetful, that I took advantage. My father nodded solemnly, selling the lie. I felt invisible, waiting. When it was my turn, my lawyer asked few questions. We were saving the blow. The judge's eyes flicked to me. I held my breath. In silence. Outside the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm, nails digging hard. Her smile vanished as she leaned close, voice sharp. You think you've won, she hissed, eyes cold. This will ruin you. My father stood behind her, silent, threatening. I pulled free, heart racing, refusing to answer. That night sleep wouldn't come. I replayed everything, fear mixing with resolve. When my lawyer called, his voice was tight. The judge wanted more proof. Something undeniable. I stared at the ceiling, knowing there was one place left. The place Grandpa avoided. My chest tightened. I hadn't been there since childhood. Pure terror. That place held Grandpa's regret, the secret everyone avoided naming. It was where everything broke years ago. Going back meant facing pain buried deep. I packed the copies carefully, kissed them like armor. If I failed, I would lose everything. If I succeeded, my family would shatter. I drove through the night, hands tight on the wheel. Every mile felt heavier. Memories crept in, unwanted, relentless. I kept hearing Grandpa's voice steady. Don't be afraid. I swallowed hard. The road narrowed, and so did my courage. I couldn't turn back. Not now. The truth waited. For me alone. At dawn, the building appeared through fog, older than I remembered. My heart sank as I parked, hands shaking. This was where Grandpa lost someone he loved, and where the last proof waited. I stepped inside, dust swirling, silence heavy. Every step echoed like a warning. I found the cabinet he described, locked, stubborn. My hands trembled as I used the key. It opened with a soft click. Inside lay files, photographs, recordings, proof heavier than money. I sank to the floor, breath gone. This could end everything. Or end us all. My phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. I answered. And froze. The voice on the line was calm, familiar, dangerous. They knew where I was. They told me to leave now. My blood ran cold as I clutched the files. If I stayed, things would escalate. If I ran, I might lose everything. I looked at Grandpa's proof, then the door. Someone was coming. My hands shook, decision burning. I had seconds, and no room for fear. I chose to stay. Footsteps echoed outside. The handle turned, and the door began to open. Everything hung on this moment. I braced myself for the fight ahead, knowing nothing would be the same. Grandpa's countryside house stood at the end of a cracked road, surrounded by tall grass and silence. I parked the car and sat there, hands frozen on the wheel, breathing in fear and dust through the open window. This was the place everyone pretended didn't exist. The place my parents never mentioned. My chest tightened as I stepped out, the door creaking like it recognized me. The front door resisted, swollen from years of neglect, then gave way with a long groan. The air inside was stale, heavy with old wood, damp paper, and memories that refused to stay buried. My footsteps echoed as if the house was watching me. I whispered Grandpa's name without meaning to, and the sound broke me. Every room held pieces of him. His chair by the window, the faded blanket folded just right. I ran my fingers along the table, leaving clean lines through dust. This wasn't abandonment. This was preservation. He had left things exactly where he wanted them. I remembered the letter. The line about the floorboard. My knees shook as I walked toward the back room. Each step felt like crossing into something sacred and painful. I knelt, pressed my palm to the floor, and felt it. One board looser than the rest. Prying it open took effort. My nails cracked. My breath came sharp and fast. When it lifted, I saw a small recorder wrapped in cloth, and a stack of labeled memory cards beneath it. My vision blurred as I picked them up. This was it. This was what he trusted me with. I pressed play while sitting on the cold floor. Grandpa's voice filled the room, calm and steady, like he was still alive. He spoke my name first. He said he was sorry. He said he had waited too long. Tears slid down my face as his words unfolded slowly, carefully. He talked about my parents. About pressure. About threats disguised as concern. He explained how money disappeared. How signatures were taken without consent. How fear kept him silent. He said he changed the will because I was the only one who never asked him for anything. I sobbed openly, clutching the recorder to my chest. He said he knew they would come after me. He said I needed proof because lies were louder than truth. He said he loved me, and that he was proud of me for being strong even when I didn't feel like it. I stayed there for hours, listening to every file, letting his voice guide me through his regret and resolve. By the time I stood, my legs were numb, but my purpose was clear. I packed everything carefully, like handling something alive. My lawyer listened in silence when I handed him the recordings. His confident mask slipped. His eyes softened. When the final file ended, he leaned back and nodded slowly. He said this changed everything. For the first time, hope felt real instead of fragile. But hope didn't last long. 2 days later, he called me into his office, his face pale. The recordings were gone. His office had been broken into overnight. Only my files were missing. Nothing else touched. My stomach dropped. Someone knew. Someone was watching. I drove home shaking, checking my mirrors, replaying Grandpa's voice in my head. When I confronted my parents, they denied it easily, too easily. But fear flashed across their faces, quick and sharp. Court was postponed. The judge's warning echoed in my ears. Last chance. Final opportunity. That night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One message. 5 words. Stop now or lose everything. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, knowing the fight had just turned dangerous. I locked every door that night and still slept with the lights on. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow felt close. I replayed the message again and again, trying to decide if it was a threat or a promise. My hands would not stop shaking. Grandpa's warning echoed in my mind, sharper now. In the dark, I remember being a child in this same house, running through the fields while Grandpa laughed. He used to say this place held truth because no one could hide here. I finally understood what he meant. The truth was heavy, and it was pressing on me from all sides. The next morning, I met my lawyer again. He was angry, pacing, blaming himself. He promised to recover the files, to tighten security, to protect me. I nodded, but fear had already settled deep in my bones. If they could break into his office, they could reach me anywhere. Driving home, I noticed a car following me for 3 turns. My breath caught. When it finally passed, I laughed weakly, but the fear stayed. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control, about silencing me before I could speak. I opened Grandpa's letter again that night. I traced his handwriting with my finger, grounding myself. He believed in me. He planned for this. That thought became my anchor. I wasn't alone, even if it felt that way. I hid copies of everything I still had, splitting them between places I trusted. Friends. A safety box. Even the house itself. I moved quietly, carefully, like someone learning how to survive a storm. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and broken. I dreamed of doors slamming and voices whispering my name. I woke up with my heart racing, knowing the next step would decide everything. The message stayed on my phone, unread but unforgettable. I knew one thing for certain. Stopping now would destroy me, and whatever came next would test how far I was willing to go for the truth. I stood by the window as dawn crept in, watching the sky change color, feeling myself change with it. Fear was still there, but something else was growing beside it. Resolve. Grandpa had carried this alone for years. I would not waste his courage. I deleted no messages. I documented everything. I began writing down dates, times, reactions, building my own record. If they wanted silence, I would answer with proof. If they wanted fear, I would give them persistence. Before leaving the house, I looked at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, but she looked awake. The innocence I had lost would not be returned, but clarity had taken its place. As I locked the door, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. No words this time. Just a missed call. I slipped the phone into my pocket, heart steady now. Whatever they were planning, I would meet it head on. And I knew the next move would force the truth into the open, whether they were ready or not. The house fell silent behind me, but the storm ahead was loud and waiting. I took one last breath, stepped forward, and accepted that this fight would expose everything buried for years. Somewhere my parents were making their own plans, unaware that Grandpa's truth was already moving toward them, unstoppable now, and closer than they imagined. I tightened my grip on hope and walked straight into danger. I did not sleep that night. Fear sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold, pressing every breath shorter than the last. The message on my phone kept glowing in my mind, each word sharp enough to cut. Stop now or lose everything. I stared at the ceiling, hearing my parents' voices in the dark, calm and cruel, as if they were standing beside my bed. By morning, fear turned into something harder. Resolve. I stood in the shower, letting hot water run down my back, grounding me. Grandpa's face appeared in my thoughts, the way he used to smile at me when no one else was looking. He had trusted me. He had endured years of silence and pressure so I could stand here now. I wrapped myself in a towel and whispered that I would not fail him. I met my lawyer early, before the office filled with noise. I placed the backups on his desk, my hand steady for the first time in days. He looked surprised, then impressed. I told him I trusted no one anymore, not even walls. He nodded, serious, and locked the copies in 2 different safes. Watching the doors close felt like armor clicking into place. That afternoon, he called me with his voice tight and controlled. He had pulled security footage from nearby businesses around his office. Someone had been careful but not careful enough. A familiar car appeared, registered to a shell company, traced back step by step to my father. My stomach twisted, not with shock but with confirmation. This was who they were. The next hearing arrived like a storm cloud. The courthouse smelled of old paper and tension. My parents sat across from me, stiff and pale. My mother would not meet my eyes. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. For the first time they looked unsure. When the judge entered, the room snapped to attention. My lawyer requested permission to submit new evidence. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the microphones could hear it. The judge paused, eyes sharp, then nodded. My parents' lawyer shifted in his seat. Then everything exploded. My mother gasped and slumped forward, sobbing loudly. She clutched her chest, crying that she was unwell, that the stress was killing her. The courtroom filled with voices, chairs scraping, officials rushing toward her. My father stood, shouting for help, his performance flawless. The judge banged the gavel, ordering calm. Proceedings were halted. Again. Outside, sunlight felt harsh and cruel. Reporters crowded me before I could escape, cameras flashing. They asked if I was heartless, if I was exploiting a grieving old man, if I was tearing my family apart for money. Each question burned. I said nothing. I kept walking even as tears blurred my vision. That night, alone in my apartment, doubt crept back in. I replayed everything. The threats. The lies. The public shame. I wondered if winning meant losing myself. I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes of Grandpa's things, and let myself cry until my head ached. Then I opened his letter again. I read his words slowly, letting them settle into my bones. He wrote about courage, not the loud kind but the quiet kind that shows up every day. He wrote that truth does not need permission to exist. He wrote that finishing this would cost me, but living with silence would cost more. Inside the hallway, whispers followed me like shadows. I could feel eyes on my back, measuring me, judging me. My phone buzzed with messages I did not open. Friends, distant relatives, people who suddenly had opinions about my pain. I focused on the rhythm of my steps, one after another, refusing to break. My lawyer met me near the courtroom doors. He spoke quietly, telling me the judge had seen through the act. He warned me that my parents were running out of moves, and that desperate people make dangerous choices. I nodded, understanding more than he knew. The threat message was still fresh in my mind. As we waited, my father passed by me in the hall. He stopped, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same one he wore at family dinners. His voice was low. He told me this was my last chance to be a good daughter. He said families forgive, but courts do not. I looked at him and felt nothing. Not fear. Not love. Just clarity. When he walked away, my hand shook, but my resolve did not. The judge called us back later that day, setting a final date. No delays. No excuses. As we left the building, I felt the weight of what was coming settle onto my shoulders. I knew the truth was ready. I also knew my parents would not surrender quietly. I knew the cost would be high, but silence would be higher. Every step forward felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. That night, I placed the last backup somewhere no one would ever suspect, following Grandpa's instincts, not logic. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared on the screen, shorter than the last. We warned you. Sleep refused to come. Every sound outside my window felt louder, closer. A car passing made my heart jump. I checked the locks twice, then a third time. I hated that they still had this power over my body, even as my mind stood firm. I thought about the little moments with Grandpa, the quiet afternoons, the stories he told only me. I realized this fight was never about money. It was about ending a cycle that had poisoned our family for years. It was about choosing truth over comfort. I reviewed the evidence one last time, reading every line until the facts felt etched into my memory. Each document was a shield. Each recording was a witness. I promised myself I would not let theatrics drown out the truth again. I whispered a promise into the empty room, my voice steady. I would speak clearly. I would not shrink. I would let the truth stand on its own, no matter who it exposed. As dawn crept in, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I would face it standing, not hiding. I was done being afraid. My breath caught as I held the phone, feeling the weight of the choice I had already made. There was no turning back now, only forward into whatever waited. The truth was ready. So was I. Everything depended on what happened next. I braced myself for the fight ahead. Nothing would stop me now. This was war. I stared at it, my pulse racing, knowing the next hearing would decide everything. I sat in the courtroom with my hands locked together, nails biting skin, breath shallow and loud in my ears. When the judge ordered the recordings played, the clerk pressed a button, and Grandpa's voice rose from small speakers, steady and calm. Every head turned. I felt my chest crack open. He spoke my name, explained his fears, and described my parents without anger, only truth. My father stiffened. My mother froze. I watched years of lies start to tremble under one simple, honest voice. The room felt smaller, heavier, and I could not look away from them anymore now. The judge leaned forward as the recording continued, Grandpa detailing dates, amounts, and warnings he ignored too long. Screens lit up with bank transfers matching his words exactly. My lawyer rose slowly, voice controlled, guiding the court through evidence piece by piece. My parents' lawyer objected, again and again, but each protest sounded thinner. I studied my father's face as color drained from it. My mother's hand shook in her lap. For once, their confidence was gone, replaced by quiet, spreading panic. The truth was standing tall, and it refused to be pushed aside today by them alone at last. When my parents were questioned, Everything unraveled fast. My father answered before hearing questions fully, then corrected himself, then went silent. My mother cried again, but the sound felt hollow now. The judge asked about signatures, about withdrawals, about threats Grandpa mentioned. They contradicted each other openly. I felt dizzy watching it happen, justice moving with slow, heavy steps. Every answer dug them deeper. I remember being a child, believing every word they said, and grief mixed with fierce relief. My heart pounded wildly, yet hope finally found space to breathe inside me without fear today for once now here. Their lawyer stood, voice strained, trying to cast doubt on Grandpa's mental state. The judge stopped him mid-sentence. She reminded the court that manipulation thrives on silence, not confusion. My knees weakened at her words. Screens displayed timelines, phone logs, and contracts. Each one aligned perfectly. I saw recognition flicker across faces in the gallery. This was no misunderstanding. This was calculated theft. My parents looked smaller with every passing minute. I sat straighter, realizing I was no longer defending myself alone. The law itself seemed to rise between us, firm and unyielding at that moment in court now today. My lawyer then called the witness Grandpa trusted most. An old friend stepped forward, hands steady, eyes clear. He spoke of meetings, of warnings, of promises my parents broke repeatedly. He confirmed Grandpa feared retaliation and chose silence to survive. Hearing it hurt, but it also strengthened me. The judge listened without interruption. My parents stared at the floor. I realized Grandpa had protected me even then, arranging every safeguard patiently. Tears slid down my face, not from pain but from gratitude. His voice echoed courage through the room, sealing truths long denied by everyone present, including my parents there. The courtroom felt suspended in time as the judge reviewed everything silently. My pulse throbbed in my throat. I dared not look at my parents. Their lawyer whispered urgently, but it changed nothing. The judge's pen paused, then moved again. I remembered Grandpa teaching me patience, telling me truth always needs time. I held on to that memory, breathing slowly, waiting. The power in the room had shifted completely. I was no longer the accused daughter. I was the one standing with facts. Whatever came next would define my future, and my family forever in this courtroom right now today alone. The judge finally spoke, voice measured and sharp. She summarized the evidence, the recordings, the witness testimony. Each sentence felt like a weight lifted from my chest. She addressed my parents directly, asking if they wished to respond. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother stared ahead, defeated. Silence answered for them. I realized then the truth had already won, regardless of the verdict. Justice was no longer a distant idea. It was here, breathing, undeniable. Still, the final words had not yet fallen, and my heart knew it. Everything balanced on seconds ahead for me now. During the recess before the ruling, memories flooded me without warning. Grandpa teaching me to read, correcting me gently, trusting me with small secrets. I realized he had been preparing me for this fight long before I understood it. My parents whispered fiercely across the aisle, desperation finally exposed. I felt strangely calm, anchored by truth. No matter how the judge ruled, they could never erase what was revealed today. The lies had collapsed publicly. That alone felt like justice taking its first breath inside the silent courtroom walls where everyone waited together for the decision, now in fear quietly. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder softly, saying nothing, needing no words. Across the room, my father avoided looking at me. His posture collapsed. My mother stared straight ahead, mascara streaked, face blank. I wondered when they stopped seeing me as their child. The judge returned, expression unreadable. The clerk called everyone to order. I felt every sound sharpen. This was the moment Grandpa had prepared for. My stomach tightened, but I stayed still, ready to face whatever truth demanded. Silence pressed down hard, stretching seconds into something painful and endless for everyone sitting there waiting to hear it. Now please. The judge cleared her throat, scanning the room once more. I felt heat rise to my face. My parents shifted nervously. Pens hovered. Papers waited. This was no longer just about money. It was about truth, accountability, and the cost of betrayal. I thought of Grandpa's last smile, the quiet trust in his eyes. Whatever happened next would honor him. I straightened my back, grounding myself. The past had been painful, but the future was finally within reach, balanced on honesty alone. My breath slowed as the judge prepared to speak the ruling that would define everything for us all. The courtroom seemed to lean forward with me as the judge began. My heart thundered, drowning out every other sound. I gripped the bench, knuckles white. Across the aisle, my parents looked smaller than ever, trapped in the truth they created. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory, steady and sure. The judge lifted her gaze, meeting mine directly. In that instant, before a single word was spoken, I understood everything was about to change forever. The verdict waited on her lips, ready to fall and decide our fate as silence held the room one breath longer than anyone expected now. The courtroom was so silent I could hear my own breathing. It sounded too loud. The judge sat upright, papers spread before him, glasses resting low on his nose. He didn't rush. He didn't look at anyone else first. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, steady, and final. He ruled in my favor. Completely. For a second, I didn't understand the words. They floated past me like sound underwater. Then they landed, one by one, heavy and undeniable. The will stood. The evidence was valid. The theft was real. My parents' actions were condemned in clear, sharp language. The judge didn't soften it. He said they had abused trust, exploited vulnerability, manipulated a man who depended on them. He referred their conduct for further investigation, his tone leaving no room for mercy. I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not joy. Release. I looked at my parents for the first time without fear. My father stared straight ahead, jaw trembling. My mother's shoulders collapsed inward, her hands clenched tightly together. They didn't cry. They didn't argue. They didn't look at me. When court officers stepped forward and asked them to stand, it felt unreal. Years of control, of authority, of unquestioned power dissolved in minutes. They were escorted out through a side door, heads down, faces pale. They never once turned around. I stayed seated long after the room began to move again. People whispered. Chairs scraped. Someone touched my shoulder gently. My lawyer leaned close and said my name, his voice quiet and proud. We did it, he said. I nodded, but my throat wouldn't work. Outside, the doors of the courthouse opened and sunlight poured in like something new. It felt brighter than I remembered. Warmer. Almost unfamiliar. I stepped into it slowly, blinking, as if I'd been underground for years. My phone buzzed in my hand. Messages poured in. I didn't read them. I called my lawyer instead, thanking him again, my voice shaking. He told me to take the day, to breathe, to let it sink in. When the call ended, I stood alone on the courthouse steps. For the first time in months, no one was shouting. No one was threatening. No one was watching my every move. The silence felt wide and strange. I realized I had one. And I had lost something too. The family I thought I had was gone. Not taken from me today, but revealed as something it never truly was. That grief came quietly, slipping in beside relief. I let it sit there without fighting it. Grandpa's face came to mind. His steady eyes. His calm voice in the recordings. His faith in me. That faith felt louder than the ache in my chest. He had believed I could stand alone. Now I understood why. I went home and sat on the floor of his old bedroom, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked yet. For the first time, the room didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful, like he had finally been heard. Days passed differently after that. Slower, quieter. I handled paperwork, met with lawyers, signed documents that closed one chapter and opened another. Each signature felt like a boundary being drawn, clean and firm. Then a letter arrived from the court. Official, neutral, precise. It outlined next steps. Investigations, reviews, possible charges. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make my hands shake again. Justice wasn't finished with my parents. What happened next would unfold without me at the center of it. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Grandpa's. That night I dreamed of walking through the countryside house again. Sunlight pouring through dusty windows. Grandpa stood there, smiling, not saying anything, just watching me walk forward. When I woke, the dream stayed with me. I knew the legal battle was over. The verdict had been spoken. But the emotional reckoning was only beginning. Healing didn't come with a gavel. Closure wasn't signed on paper. I had to decide who I was without fear guiding every step. I stood by the window watching the world move on outside, feeling both lighter and exposed. Winning didn't erase the damage. It gave me space to finally face it. I took a deep breath, steady and slow. The fight had ended. Now came the harder part. Inheritance was never just property. I understood that the first morning I visited Grandpa's grave after the verdict. The sky was pale, stretched wide and quiet, like it was holding space for me. I stood there alone, hands clasped tightly in front of me, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into something calmer, heavier, truer. I told them, I whispered. My voice shook, but it didn't break. I told him about the ruling, about the recordings playing in court, about the truth finally being spoken out loud after so many years of silence. I told him they listened, that they couldn't twist it anymore, that his voice mattered. The wind moved softly through the trees, brushing against my coat. I imagined him listening the way he always did, quietly, fully. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel like I was talking to the ground. I felt heard. I stayed there longer than I planned. Long enough for grief to soften into gratitude. Long enough to realize I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not even at them. The fight had taken that energy out of me. What remained was something steadier. Responsibility. The money sat untouched in my account for weeks. I couldn't bring myself to spend it. Felt wrong to rush. Grandpa had waited years to protect me. I could wait a little longer to decide what came next. Then one afternoon, I drove out to the countryside house again. The road looked the same, cracked and narrow, but I felt different driving it. Lighter. The house stood quietly at the end, worn but proud, like it had been waiting. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, dust still floated in the air, but the silence felt gentler now. I walked through each room slowly. I didn't rush. I touched the walls, the window frames, the table where Grandpa used to sit. This place held his patience, his fear, his hope. I knew then what I wanted to do. Restoring the house wasn't easy. Took months. Contractors came and went. Floors were fixed. Walls were cleaned but not erased. I kept the parts that mattered. The chair by the window. The marks on the doorframe showing how tall I'd grown. Healing wasn't about pretending nothing happened. It was about honoring what did. Some days were harder than others. I'd find an old object and have to sit down, breathing through the ache. Other days I felt peace settling in quietly, like sunlight finding its way into corners that had been dark for too long. During that time my parents tried to reach me. Calls I didn't answer. Messages I didn't open. Letters I didn't read. I didn't block them out of anger. I just knew confrontation wasn't what I needed anymore. Closure didn't require another fight. It required boundaries. The silence I chose felt different from the silence Grandpa was forced into. Mine was protective. Intentional. Mine gave me room to heal. Standing in the restored house one evening, watching the sun dip low through the clean windows, I finally understood Grandpa's last lesson. Strength wasn't about winning in court. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about standing firm when everyone expects you to break. I thought about the girl I had been at the beginning of this. Afraid. Confused. Clinging to the idea that love meant endurance. That girl didn't know she was allowed to walk away. That she could choose herself without becoming something cruel. Now I did. I sat at the old table, the same one where Grandpa used to drink his tea, and wrote plans for the future. Not rushed ones. Careful ones. Ideas about what this house could become. A place of learning. Of rest. Of honesty. Something that carried his values forward instead of burying them. Night settled around the house, quiet and peaceful. I turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the doorway listening. No threats. No shouting. No fear humming under my skin. Just stillness. The past no longer owned me. But as I locked the door and looked back at the house one last time, a question rose softly inside me, not frightening but open. What kind of future would I choose to build now? Grief was the beginning of everything, even though I didn't understand that at first. I thought losing Grandpa would break me completely. Instead, it woke me up. His death stripped away comfort and illusion, forcing me to see the truth I had been protected from for years. Betrayal didn't just hurt my heart. It forced my voice out of hiding. For a long time, I believed being a good daughter meant staying quiet. Enduring. Letting things slide for the sake of peace. What I learned is that silence only protects those who abuse it. Speaking up didn't make me cruel. It made me honest. And honesty became my strength. Justice came, not with shouting or revenge, but with clarity. The court did its work. The consequences followed their own path. I didn't need to watch it unfold to feel complete. Knowing the truth was acknowledged was enough. Knowing Grandpa was finally believed was enough. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in boundaries. In choosing not to answer calls that reopened wounds. In rebuilding a house filled with memories instead of tearing it down. In allowing myself to grieve what I never truly had, while protecting what I still could become. I learned that inheritance is never just money or property. It is values, courage, integrity, the quiet strength to do what is right when it would be easier to walk away. Grandpa didn't just leave me assets. He left me a mirror. And through it I learned who I was meant to be. Standing alone used to terrify me. Now I understand it differently. Standing alone can also mean standing strong. Can mean choosing yourself when no one else will. It can mean honoring truth even when it costs you comfort. I didn't win because I defeated anyone. I won because I refused to disappear. And in the end, that self-respect became the greatest inheritance of all.